Today I'm going to talk to you about thermography. Most of you have heard of breast thermography. I actually recently had a whole body thermography, and I'm going to explain in this video what it is, what it isn't. I'm going to tell you the prep, what you need to know before you go. I'm also going to tell you why I think a whole body is worth it versus just doing breast thermography. I'm going to explain my experience. I'm not going to tell you my results. I'm going to give you the Coles notes on it in another video on my results and what I'm going to do about it. And what does it show you? What does a thermography show you? And then I think there's a bit of misinformation out there that it's pseudoscience, that there's no real relevance, but I found some interesting information. So I am going to go through some of the studies on thermography so that you see what the relevance is and how it might help you. So thermography is using an infrared camera to detect hot and cold patterns within the skin. It goes about 1/4 of an inch deep, and it actually can provide you with information on vascular patterns and heat patterns within the body. Now, most of you know that, well, I hope most of you know that when there is heat, it usually indicates a little bit of inflammation. So this is what thermography is. Thermography is not a definitive diagnostic tool to diagnose you with a disease. It is simply a tool or an indicator to help you kind of identify where you might be having some issues or potential problems. So I'll give you an example here. I know I have an issue with my right hand, right wrist. I've actually had an MRI. And in the thermography report, it showed this inflammation with a really, really strong red. I am going to have a few little pictures of my own in this video that I'll show you so that you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Maybe I'll get into what it looks like. So when you are in the room with the thermographer, the person who's taking the photo, the place that I went, they actually have a curtain. The person who's taking the photographs is behind the curtain. The camera is out because the camera's got to be taking the pictures of you. The person behind the curtain is controlling the camera from behind the curtain while you're standing there nude. I mean, initially you have your underwear on, and then if you're doing whole body, you're going to take those panties off, and you're naked. And that person is not standing outright taking a photograph of you from the camera. They're looking at the computer. So what are they seeing? People are like, well, what are you looking at? Okay. So the best way to describe a photo would be, let's say they're doing the head and neck. You will see the thermal pattern. So you'll see the shape of my face. You might be able to identify it's me, maybe not. And there'll be colors. There'll be reds, blues, yellows, greens, and all of these colors indicate the thermal pattern. So when it's really, really, really red, that means there's a lot of congestion, maybe inflammation, somewhere to look. And so if you're taking a whole body, yes, you're going to see the shape of that person's body. You're going to see the physique of that person, but it's not like you're looking at a buck naked picture of somebody. You're looking at the shape, yes, but you're looking at the thermal patterns. So you're going to see all the greens, the reds, the blues. If that makes sense. It's really important to prep properly for thermography. So, what does that mean? That means don't take a steaming hot shower because remember, it's looking at thermal patterns, and often, after a shower, the vascularity, like your veins, your everything dilates. So, you don't really want that. You don't want to do infrared sauna. You don't want to put body creams and makeup on because that's stimulating the skin. You don't want to have any kind of lymphatic drainage. Don't put deodorant on. Um, don't do any kind of exercise or chiropractic or osteopathy, probably about 24 hours before. And the room that you're in will be a regulated temperature. So it's not going to be hot in there. It's not going to be cold in there. If you are a woman that is menopausal and you're having hot flashes, the person, the thermographer, will be able to see that when that's happening. So they'll stop taking the photos, let that hot flash pass, and then continue. Because obviously the hot flash shows vascularity, right? Like your vascular system is overreacting with blood flow. So you don't want that. You want to be at a regulated normal temperature. Even when I was standing there and a bit of time before she was doing my lymph nodes under my arms, she made me stand with my hands on my hips while she was photographing other areas of my body, which would allow for the cooling under the armpits. Otherwise, if you're like this, it's always going to be a little bit warmer. So that's really important that you follow the prep. The place where I went was very discreet. I mean, sure, you're naked. And for people who are really uncomfortable with that, that could be a little bit of a hurdle for you because, if you're doing whole body, you're naked. If you're doing breast thermography, you're naked from the waist up. So, you have to deal with it. And personally, I could care less. I've had 2 children, right? So this is not a definitive diagnostic tool. So it's going to give you an indication of potential problems. Now, what I'm going to read you, it actually comes from the National Institutes of Health. Thermography has been studied and looked at since I think it was 1956 was the first time it was used. And in the 70s, they were using thermography and found that 84 to 95% true malignancy was found through thermography, and 6 to 13% of false positives. Now, remember, if you're looking at a scan, which I will have to put some photos here so that you can kind of have an idea, and you see like a lot of red, like dark red, don't let it scare you. Okay, because that doesn't mean, oh my God, you have cancer. It's just showing vascularity and heat patterns, which is related to congestion and inflammation, but it's not a diagnosis. But guess what? So if I saw a lot of vascularity and a lot of red in the breast tissue, I would immediately go and get my mammogram, right? Like I'm not anti-mammogram at all. I'm just anti-radiation. And the one thing about thermography is you're not going to get any radiation whatsoever. So if I can limit some of the radiation I'm exposed to, I'm going to try and do that. And the really interesting thing about my thermography was that my hands were bright red, like bright red. I'm going to talk about my protocol and my what they found in another video. But I just want to say, like radiation, I'm always on my phone. Interesting, huh? So let me get back to this, this study. So it's actually a review from the National Institutes of Health, Thermography as a breast cancer screening review. You can go and find it. So this is a quote. I wanted to read it to you as the quote. Valuable data on thermal and circulatory characteristics of the tissue is found in thermography. So it's valuable data as assessed by the National Institutes of Health. Early detection of breast abnormalities prior to pathological changes can be seen in thermography. Again, this is all about prevention. And I am going to talk about what I'm doing and what I saw in another video. Be sure to like and follow my channel to be able to ensure that you don't miss it when it comes up. Thermography has been found, and I'm still reading this review. It's useful in avoiding unnecessary biopsies. So, for example, if I really don't see any vascularity, I'm not saying, and I'm not giving medical advice here, people, this is just my choice. If I don't see a lot of vascularity in my breasts, for example, I'm not going to go and get a mammogram tomorrow. I'm not saying I'm not going to have one. I'm just saying I'm not going to rush out. So the National Institutes of Health indicate that it is useful in avoiding unnecessary biopsies. And I'm one of those people that's had to have one of those unnecessary biopsies. Well, you can say necessary, unnecessary, but I had a benign tumor back in 2011, and I had to have a breast biopsy, which was not fun. It was a core biopsy. And, I was recalled, all of the fear, right? So if there's one thing I know as an individual who's had, unfortunately, quite a bit of cancer in my family, one thing I'm going to tell you right now that's really important to know about cancer versus a benign cyst is cancer has, and this was explained to me by my daughter's oncologist when she had cancer. Cancerous masses have arms and legs and blood flow. This is why thermography is considered a complementary and useful tool, according to this study, as a complementary tool for breast cancer screening. Because if you have a mass, let's say I had a mass on my hand, if the mass is movable under my fingers, the chances are, and again, this is not diagnostic, it's just something I've learned from cancer, unfortunately, in my family. If it moves around under the fingers, there's not those arms and legs hanging on with blood flow to the area, right? Because it's the blood flow that causes it has vascular arms and legs and connections to your connective tissue. So I just want to say, this to me is the most important, I guess, thing to note about thermography is the red indicates blood flow, indicates inflammation. What kind? Well, that's where the further diagnostic testing comes into play. So I've mentioned that there's no radiation. Also, the other thing is it's quite low cost, and it depends on where you go. I will put in my notes here where I went. If you're in the Greater Toronto area or in Ontario, and they're soon going to be operating out of BC as well, you can go where I went. So cancer cells, this is a quote, cancer cells grow. They need more oxygen-rich blood for growth. And the temperature around a tumor also increases. So it's really important that I note this in the study. And they talk about the specificity of 82.39% to detect malignant breast tissue. So all of this that I read, it comes from the National Institutes of Health. So if you have a doctor that completely dismisses thermography, please do send this study to them, because the dismissive nature of some physicians, it's not great, because it has been shown in this review from the National Institutes of Health to be a valuable complementary tool. So if you are having issues, let's say this is the first thing I did, but I was also experiencing a lot of pain in my wrist, I could take this thermography to my doctor and say, listen, I had this done. It's showing some vascularity, some inflammation, some blood flow, some issues. Let's just say issues with my wrist, and I'm having so much pain. Can we look at this further? I hope this helps, and I hope this answers your questions on thermography. Please follow, like. I am going to discuss a protocol, and I am going to discuss more of my own findings in another video. Thank you.